Are you a calm and reasonable person?
God of War Ragnarok is, of course, steeped in Norse mythology. Now, characters like Thor, Atreus, Odin, and many others are all within the expansive world of the video game series. Now, what fascinates me about the God of War franchise is its unique take on Norse mythology and some of the depictions of the gods therein. Now, throughout its history, the God of War franchise has subverted the mythology of different cultures in a way that we've never seen done with such attention to detail related to the source material. Now, bringing gods like Thor and Kratos' son Atreus, aka Loki, into the God of War pantheon are ones I think are well worth highlighting to explore how they in particular have been depicted throughout movies, television shows, and games. Because quite honestly, let's face it, the God of War video game series has done it way better than most, including Marvel.
Noob Master, hey, it's Thor again. You know, the God of Thunder?
Oh, that's right. Yes, go cry to your father, you little weasel.
Oh, and for the sake of this particular video, unless otherwise noted, any mention of Ragnarok is in reference to the upcoming God of War game. Not the mythological event, the MCU movie, the Netflix show, the anime, or any of the heavy metal bands, albums, or songs who borrowed that particular name, because this can get confusing.
The prophecies say Fimbulwinter leads to Ragnarok. War is coming.
I mentioned Marvel off top because, you know what, let's face it, when the majority of people think of figures like Thor or Loki, they almost immediately think of Marvel's depictions of each in the MCU. Now, I personally was never a fan of how Marvel depicts Norse gods because I never think of divine beings as superheroes from another world. Although I guess Asgard is technically another world, and director Taika Waititi had this to say.
They're aliens, mate. Look at them. They're aliens. They're space aliens. They're space Vikings.
Okay, well, you know what? You can choose to believe that if you will, but I digress. Now let's focus on the appearances. Now in Marvel Comics, Marvel movies, etc., Thor's aesthetic is muscular, tall, with long flowing blonde hair. Now taking a look at God of War Ragnarok, Thor's appearance is wider, bearded with red hair, and with a bit of a belly. Now, it gave off Marvel's Fat Thor vibes when we first saw his reveal, which is the only similarity between the two depictions.
Wait, don't it look all right?
You look like melted ice cream.
That and the fact that he wields a hammer, although that changed later on in the MCU with Thor's use of Stormbreaker. Now, throwing a little bit more weight behind it, pun intended, Thor's hefty appearance in the MCU at this particular point was due to him feeling depressed, blaming himself for that now infamous moment.
You should have gone for the head.
God of War's depiction of Thor is fat because, well, that's how he was built, based on his godly genetics. Now, Thor of mythology is described as having red hair with a beard, and beards in Norse culture were indicative of masculinity. Now, you take a look at most Vikings, the majority were represented with long beards, so you can see that particular notion. Now, Thor's physical appearance in God of War Ragnarok is far more accurate to the mythos and is rather fitting for the world created in the God of War video games. Now, while I've never been a big fan of how mythological figures are depicted in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I still applaud their inclusion. Yes, because in some instances, the MCU has managed to acknowledge a few elements from the source material. Loki, for example, was an amazing Disney Plus series where we were introduced to different variants of Loki.
Hello.
Now, in Norse mythology, Loki's shape-shifting abilities render him quite malleable, meaning he can take various different forms. And we see this in the Disney Plus series, with Alligator Loki being one of my personal favorite variants. I loved him. Now, Loki within the God of War franchise has yet to rear his head, at least by that particular name. Now, Atreus' mother wanted to name him Loki, which means Atreus is likely the God of War Ragnarok incarnation of the Norse god and will likely be explored in depth in the upcoming game. Now, as to whether or not the MCU's depiction of Loki is superior to that of God of War's remains to be seen, at least until the video game is released. Now, Ragnarok's setting taking place during the ancient times of Scandinavia is what makes Ragnarok feel more accurate than the MCU's placement of of these Norse gods in modern times, in our world. But what kind of vibe do you really get when you take a character out of the days of yore and place them within a more futuristic setting? Like, does it even feel the same? From the beautiful Scandinavian backgrounds to the relentless, brutal Valkyrie, God of War really immerses you in ancient mythological times. Like, Thor's appearance is so fitting in this environment, but what would happen if he were transported 2,000 years into the future, had cybernetic parts, and lived in a futuristic world based on Norse mythology? Like, how accurate would his depiction be, and what would you call it? Well, you'd call it Too Human. Yes, Too Human, a 2008 action role-playing game developed by Silicon Knights of Eternal Darkness and Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes fame. Too Human presents Thor and the other Norse gods as cybernetically enhanced beings tasked with protecting civilization from Loki and his menacing machines. Now, in the game, it's revealed that 95% of Thor's body is replaced with cybernetics. Like why a literal god needs to be enhanced like some Cyberpunk 2077 thug is beyond me.
Be quiet.
Too Human was published by Microsoft Games Studios and may very well have been Xbox's attempt to capitalize on the popularity of mythology seen in the God of War series of games, which first hit the PS2 in 2005. Now, much like the original God of War series, Too Human had plans to be a trilogy, but due to some legal troubles with Epic Games and having to file for bankruptcy, the dev team behind the game never saw that plan come to fruition. Now, Too Human might have succumbed to its own mortality sooner than intended, but I'd like for us to think about the direction Too Human took in comparison to that of the God of War series. Like, why take these mythological beings and place them in a futuristic setting? Like, I always question the displacement of these divine beings, but then I guess I have to remind myself that it's just a creative choice. So is Sony Santa Monica's creative direction with Ragnarok. And with it, it feels like a stronger representation of Norse mythology, giving the gods represented therein a more accurate aesthetic. God of War Ragnarok's Thor definitely trumps any other 3D appearance of the character, including all the countless Marvel video games. But what about his other non-Marvel 2D variants? Thor has appeared in anime like Record of Ragnarok, possibly sporting the largest Mjolnir anyone has ever seen. He's also made his appearance in DC, both in the Sandman and Wonder Woman line of comics. Now, each of these representations of Thor hold close to the source material and yet differ vastly from one another. Like, for example, Record of Ragnarok's depiction of Thor has Thor with a sleek, muscular build, red hair, but with a beating frickin' heart located within his hammer that can grow to an exaggerated size. You know, you can always count on anime to make everything over the top. And taking a look at DC Comics' depiction of Thor, it seems they took close note to the Norse mythology, similar to Santa Monica Studios. Now, while these depictions in the DC pages and displayed in the aforementioned Netflix anime were great, it seems Thor is primed to really set things off more than these variations have when he takes up arms against Kratos in Ragnarok. Now, after all, we're entering Norse mythology's version of End of Times here with Ragnarok. Now, this is essentially hell on earth, and Kratos will undoubtedly have to answer for his actions stemming from the previous game. And with it, we're getting what I believe to be the most creative take on Norse mythology we've seen across any form of media. Now, what started off as a mere revenge story against the God of War has transformed into a father-son tale of survival and keeping one's tormented past a secret in order to find some semblance of normalcy. But of course, the gods talk. You know, they're up there talking, and ain't no way those deities weren't aware of a god-killing guy roaming around in the land of the mortals. They were aware of you, Kratos. Come on, you can't hide forever.
I do not need you to protect me.
Anyways, Santa Monica's ability to remain accurate to the source material while infusing it with its unique and creative take is something special, and honestly, I gotta say, it's a sight to behold. Now, taking a look at all these other representations of both Norse gods and mythology from other creative sources should give you a better appreciation of what Santa Monica Studios is doing and has been doing with the God of War franchise. The accuracy and attention to detail from what we've seen so far is stunning and should get anyone, and I mean anyone who has been a fan of the franchise since its humble beginnings, hyped to help Kratos as he continues to eradicate every single freaking god he encounters. Now we'll see if Thor is a formidable foe and if he survives God of War's version of the endgame. Thankfully, we won't have to wait too long. For more God of War, please check out this video of our resident Norse mythology expert reacting to Ragnarok storytelling. And for more gaming coverage, keep it right here on IGN.